Today's students are tomorrow's front line. Today's visionaries will become tomorrow's leaders. And today's research will discover tomorrow's solutions. For ourselves, for others, and for our world. Southern Cross University, transforming tomorrow.
G'day and welcome to the National Virtual Expo. I'm Rob Malicki on Garrigouland in Sydney. Welcome to this session on how this way of studying changes everything. And we're talking about block model studies. Now, for most of you, this might be something that you've never heard of before, but I can tell you what, the academic research shows that studying in block mode is exceptionally good for students. We're talking about things like better retention of information. We're talking about less stress and pressure and better results. And so we're going to be diving into this with Southern Cross University, who's one of the pioneers of the block model here in Australia. We're going to be hearing from a senior academic at the university and just how this might make your journey through university a lot less stressful and a lot more productive. Let's jump into the session.
Hi, hello, I'm Professor Thomas Roach. I'm Pro-Vice Chancellor, Academic Quality at Southern Cross University. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I know you're here today because you're thinking about your study options, where you're going to study and what you're going to study. Today I'm going to tell you a little bit about Southern Cross University and how we approach learning and the student experience. And I hope that helps you a little bit think about university and what you'd like to do there, and helps you think about the type of university you'd like to study at and the type of experience you'd like to have. In doing that, I'm going to tell you all about the Southern Cross model and how we do things differently here at Southern Cross University. Southern Cross University is a fantastic university. Why? Because it's different to many other universities. It's different because it puts at the heart of what it does how students learn. So over the past 30 years, I've worked at universities in Europe, Asia, and Australia, and Southern Cross really stands out there. Why? Because it's not a traditional university that does things the same as universities have done them for hundreds of years. So Southern Cross, instead of having a semester of 13 to 15 weeks, expecting students to come on campus for lectures, sit there quietly and take notes, and then at the end regurgitate everything in exams that they've memorized in the lead up, Southern Cross does things differently. What it does is it thinks about students' lives, your lives. Your lives are busy, and you shouldn't have to put them on hold while you study. So at Southern Cross, how we accommodate your busy lives is we break the semester in two. Students don't have to study 4 subjects at a time. They only have to study 2. And they study 2 subjects over 6 weeks. So you're juggling fewer things to keep in your mind, fewer assessments to do at any one time. And what you'll do if you come to Southern Cross is you'll work and go deep in 2 subjects, do assignments during that time and assessments, and usually you won't have exams at all, unless there's a special reason from an accrediting body, such as chartered accountants or nurses. They might require you to do exams to get professional recognition. But if you don't, we believe there are better ways to assess learning. And that's what you'll do with us. And that's why Southern Cross is different. Shorter terms, more focus, less juggling, a better experience for students. So why do we do things differently at Southern Cross? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is we noticed that our students, they were struggling to complete their studies. We noticed that after about the 7th week, many of our students simply stopped coming to lectures. They didn't hand in that piece of assessment in the 7th week. It was just too much. They were juggling too much. And we know that many of our students have part-time jobs, they have family and caring responsibilities. So we reflected on, well, what can we do to make our students' lives easier? And that didn't mean making the quality of the learning less or making the content easier. It meant arranging the learning so that they could focus more and go deeper with their studies and bite things off and finish them piece by piece. So the learning journey over the course of the year, they're still learning the same material, but they're having to juggle fewer things at one time. And that's really what drove our thinking forward. And that's two things: our students' lives and how we could make learning more easy for them, but also was based on the science of learning, how students work. We simply know that all of us can only manage so much cognitive load, and we've tried to reduce that and get students to be active and focused on as fewer things as possible at any one time. And that's why we changed from the semester model to the Southern Cross model. So a typical student is a busy person. A typical student comes to the university, but they already have a life outside it. So they might have a part-time job, they might have a family, caring responsibilities, they might have other commitments, and they need to maintain all of that while they study. And we understand that and acknowledge that. Now, at most universities, you'll have all of those commitments swimming around, and then suddenly you'll start the semester. The semester will go for 13 or 15 weeks, and during that time, you'll study usually about 4 or 5 subjects at any one time. And that means throughout the semester, you could have 3 or 4 or 5 assessments due in the same week. And when exams come, you'll have to make sure you're across all the information, you've developed all the skills you need for that critical exam period, usually in week 15 or 16 or 17. At Southern Cross, it's a little bit different though. So we still know our students come with their lives outside of university, their sporting commitments, family commitments, part-time jobs. And when they study with us, they begin by studying 2 subjects at a time. Only 2 subjects over 6 weeks. And during that time, that means the maximum number of assessments they have to juggle at any one time is just 2. So if you can imagine the juggle of 4 or 5 assessments and compare that to the juggle of 2, which is simpler, I think we all know the answer. So at Southern Cross University, a student's study experience is less stress, greater focus, greater depth, because you can immerse yourself in the learning. So that's really the difference between a traditional semester and the Southern Cross model. Some of you may be interested in how a 6-week term looks like, and by and large, it'll look the same across the disciplines, by which I mean for each subject, and we call them units, you'll have 1 workshop a week per unit. That workshop will go for an hour, and then you'll have a tutorial for 2 hours. So that means per unit, you'll have 3 hours of class contact each week. Now, if you're doing 2 units, studying full time, you will have 6 hours of class content a week. You'll probably study for about 20 hours a week for each unit, so you do need to make sure you've got about 40 hours a week available to study full time. Now, if you're doing part-time, that's only 20 hours. So you'll be doing full-time 6 hours a week class, and the rest of the study will be your self-study. You'll have online resources that are media-rich and interactive, so you'll be watching videos, going through activities, getting feedback as you go. And that way, when you come to class and you're sitting with your peers and your academics, you'll already have some understanding of the information, and you'll get to test that, get to use that in classes. Now, if you're studying something like nursing, for example, that might be in a clinical setting. So you might be dealing with patients or mock patients, and you might be testing your knowledge about different matters around anatomy and physiology. If you're an engineering student, you might be doing that looking at a case study of how to apply the knowledge you've just been dealing with in a mechanical or a civil context. So that's how studies look at Southern Cross University. I hope I've also given you a bit of a flavour, though, that while broadly that 3 hours of class time per unit and the 20 hours of self-study per unit is about the same, what you do will be very different depending on what discipline you're studying. Nurses will be engaged in health type scenarios, engineers in engineering scenarios. So there will be a very strong flavour and practical application of the discipline area you're studying in. So you might be wondering, this all sounds very good. What do students think about the Southern Cross model? Well, I can tell you a couple of things. The first thing is they do tell us that they feel the focus helps. They feel they can do a deeper dive, engage with the knowledge, engage with the skills, develop their understanding, and they get feedback, and then they can move on. So they're not waiting 15 weeks to understand whether they've understood Algebra 1 or physiology and anatomy. They're getting feedback as they go, and they're finished a whole subject or unit in 6 weeks. And that's really good for confidence, builds confidence quicker, lets students know how they're tracking. And our students tell us they think that's great. Another thing that they're enjoying is the active learning. So in many traditional university settings, you'll go into a lecture with 300, 400 students and you'll sit there and take notes, and then you'll sit in a tutorial, that's a smaller group. But actually most of the time you're out there by yourself. You're reading books, reading PDFs. You don't really know how you're tracking. In the Southern Cross model, we have workshops and tutorials. So when you're on campus, you're actually doing things and getting feedback, working through case studies, trying to solve problems in groups. There's a lot of focus on group activities. Our students tell us that's great because it's not just academic and learning about things in a theoretical way. It's about applying knowledge. They tell us that that is really important and that is helping them progress in their studies. And perhaps even more important in some circumstances, our community, the employers around us, they tell us that our students have the skills they need to succeed. That's great because many of our students are coming in studying education, health sciences, engineering, legal profession. They're doing that because they want a career. They want to change their life. And our employers are telling us that students who come through the Southern Cross model are equipped to do just that. And that's why they go on to get great jobs. So how is this all playing out for students in terms of their success in their studies? So if you look at Southern Cross about 5 or 6 years ago, before the Southern Cross model, students passed about 75% of the units or subjects they attempted. That means about 1 in 4 of the subjects they were trying, they were failing. That's not really great, and that's really something we wanted to fix. Now, how does it look like now, 5 or 6 years later with the Southern Cross model? We're now sitting over 90%. Over 90% of the units that students attempt, they pass. So if you can imagine, it's basically the same academics, the same subjects, but what's different? The learning experience. So that greater focus, that more active learning, that's really helping our students succeed. We're very happy about that. We've also seen something very interesting with withdrawals. So that is students who start their studies and they withdraw before the census date. So they start and they think, no, this is too much, this isn't for me. And what we've seen, it used to be about 13% of students would start their studies with us and then they would withdraw thinking, no, I can't do this. That's gone down to 7%, so it's almost halved. So the majority of students who start continue on with their studies, and we think that's great too. So many people will ask the question, well, look, we're going from 15 weeks to 6 weeks. Surely that's just cramming information into a shorter space of time. That's a myth, and I can tell you that's not what happens. Because if you think about it, previously there were 4 subjects going over 15 weeks. What we've done is we've cut that in half. So you have 2 subjects over 6, you stop, 2 subjects over 6 again. So you've actually got the same volume of learning. Students are dealing with the same volume of content, They're just given greater focus, if you like. They don't have to jump from doing accounting to doing marketing to doing HR. We tell them no, instead just focus on marketing and accounting for the first 6 weeks. And that is really helping students. So it's not about cramming at all. It's about focus. It's about giving people a deeper dive into the same information. It's a bit like trying to, instead of watching or listening to 4 people talk at the one time, just having a conversation with a couple of people, it allows you to have deeper engagement. So I mentioned earlier, we're not great fans of exams. Now, exams have their place, and sometimes they're necessary. And some accrediting bodies, professional ones, will require you to do exams if you're going to go out and practice. But are exams actually the best way of assessing understanding, knowledge? No, they're not. In fact, what exams rely a lot upon is memorization. And sometimes we really don't need to know if a student has memorized something. We need to know if they understand it. So what we do is we create assessments that reflect the types of things students will do out in the world when they leave the academy. So we have projects where students they might need to go out into a business, look at a problem, and try and apply a skill to that business problem. If you're studying health sciences, for example, we do something called occupational skills examinations, which sound like an exam, but they're very different to the pen and paper ones sitting down in a room while people walk around and make sure you're not cheating. What an occupational skills exam is, you have a practice clinical setting and you have to undertake something that you would do in a health setting. So that might be, for example, draw blood, administer medication, take a pulse, depending on the skill being tested. And that's really what we're all about. We're about moving beyond seeing if someone has memorized something to seeing if they can apply knowledge, solve a problem, use concepts and skills in a context that will reflect what they're going to do when they leave university. Not many people have to write exams once they use university or write essays. So I think we should all move on from using those as standard assessment forms. And that's what we've done at Southern Cross. Now, if you're thinking about the year ahead, you might be thinking about taking a break at some stage, or you might have family commitments, and you might be wondering what happens if I start the academic year. Can I take time out and still continue with my studies? The answer to that depends. It depends on what you're studying. So some of our degrees, there are multiple intakes, and there's a great deal of flexibility. So if you're studying something like a Bachelor of Business, for example, it's very easy to do that, to step back for a time. You need to plan that with your course coordinator and then pick up your studies later on. Now, if you're studying something like a Bachelor of Veterinary Medicine, that's much more difficult. The reason for that is some of the subjects at the end of the year require you to have learned some of the information earlier in the year before you can do them. We don't want people going out into the field and trying to deal with livestock or people's pets if they haven't understood the basics of physiology, anatomy, biochemistry. So that's important to protect those livestock and pets, that you develop those skills first. So you can't just take time out and come back in that instance. And that might play out in other degrees as well. And I'm sure you can think of some context yourself, such as nursing, midwifery, and sometimes things like engineering. There are foundational skills you need to develop before you go on and start applying them. So it depends on the degree you're studying, whether you can take time out and come back and pick up the subjects straight away, or if you might have to wait some time until the subjects you need first are offered again. And it depends on the degree. And I'd encourage you, reach out to our student support team and ask them before you start, because they'll be able to help you and enable you to plan for your year. Studying at university is great fun. It's also hard work. If you're really going to learn skills and develop knowledge, you're going to have to engage very deeply and continuously with the information and your studies across the 6-week term. So it's a busy time. For all of us, when we're dealing with busy time, sometimes we need some support. And at Southern Cross University, we have many forms of support. We have first-year advisors, and I encourage you to reach out to your first-year advisor. They can help you with all manner of things. For example, if you're having trouble with an assessment and you're not sure if you're going to be able to submit it on time, reach out to them. They can tell you about special considerations, how you apply for it, how you get an extension so you can submit a bit later. First year advisors aren't the only people here to help though. We have lots of other support services, from your course coordinator to your unit assessor. They're the academics you should go to if you have questions about the content, if you're struggling to understand it. But sometimes studying at university, we have other struggles, and there might be other people you need to reach out to. And we have support services there through our client services team. And I encourage you to reach out to them, whether it's something financial, whether it's something personal. There are people at university who you can talk to all of the time. And we have a 24-hour student support line. There's never a dumb question. If you're worried, if you're troubled, please reach out. That's why we're here. So we live in a very interesting time with the rise of Gen AI. And you might be wondering, what's the role of Gen AI at university? Some people have said to me they've heard that universities don't let students use Gen AI. And that is the case in some institutions, or they allow it in a very limited way. Look, the fact of the matter is at Southern Cross University, we understand that Gen AI is here and it's here to stay. And it's part of all of our lives. So why wouldn't we use Gen AI in our studies? When you drive somewhere in your car, do you use your phone or do you get out a paper map? Well, no one's using a paper map. It just doesn't make sense. Technology makes our lives simpler. And we've embraced Gen AI at Southern Cross University. Now, how we use it differs from degree to degree and discipline to discipline. There are some instances, indeed, where you can't use it. So if you think about the health sciences, if you're on a nursing placement and you're out in a hospital and you're walking around in a ward and you see a patient's record and you think, oh, that's an interesting illness or that's an interesting medication. I've never heard of that before. I'll just take a photo of the record and get Gen AI to explain that to me. You can't do that for ethical reasons. Patient privacy comes first. And there are other instances where we've said you can't use Gen AI there. It's unethical or it's impractical. So in limited instances, we say Gen AI is not to be used, but for very good reasons. But otherwise, we do use Gen AI. And you'll need to talk to your unit assessor and course coordinator to understand how to use Gen AI for ethical reasons, but also technically in each circumstance, because it will differ whether you're studying engineering or humanities. You'll need to understand how to use it in a different way. But certainly, we think Gen AI is very important and can be a very beneficial tool to students and their learning and their future careers. So, what advice would I give to students who are about to study in a 6-week term for the first time? I would say the most important thing is go to orientation. Orientation happens in the week before studies commence, and that's where you have a great opportunity to connect. You can connect to other students who'll be your peers, might become your friends, and you'll be working with them on assignments and going through the learning journey with them. Making that connection is really important, and I'd encourage you, trust yourself, back yourself, get out there, meet people. You'll need to depend on them and get to know them as you go on. So I'd encourage you to try doing that at orientation. Connection with students isn't the only important thing though. Orientation is a fantastic opportunity to learn all about the university's support services. And you don't know what services you're going to need throughout the year. So going there in that orientation week will help you understand about the library, how to research, but all those other support services I've mentioned. So whether that's counsellors, financial support, advocacy support systems, first-year advisors, that's really where you find out about all that stuff. So I'd encourage you, go to orientation, super important, sets you off in the right direction at the beginning of your journey. So you're about to make a big decision which university you're going to study at. You've got lots of options before you. I'd encourage you, think about it. Think about it deeply, reflect on all the information that's out there, ask a lot of questions. There's no right answer about which university is for you, but there are better answers. Find the one that best fits your interests, both in terms of what's being taught and how it's being taught. Think about how you'd like to learn. What would you like that experience to look like? And think about what you want to learn and which university offers the closest match to the types of things you're interested in. If you keep those things in mind, I'm sure you'll find a place where you'll be having a great experience, and moving on towards your educational goals. And I wish you all the best with it.
I got my first grade at uni, and I just laughed out loud. It wasn't just a pass, I actually got a high distinction, and I'd always done terrible at school. I did the PSP course at SEU, which gave me like the foundations of what you need to be able to study at uni, and I didn't fail that, got good grades, so I was like, hey, we'll keep going. Studied a bachelor in psych, did all right, so I kept going and got into honours, and now I'm writing a thesis. Getting that first grade was the first time that I felt like I can actually do this, and it has led me to get to where I am now, and I'm really grateful of it.
Well, I hope you got something out of this session, and if you have any questions at all, you can head to choosingyouruni.com and ask Lumen. Lumen is your AI guide who knows about every university, every pathway, every option that we've talked about throughout this virtual expo, and Lumen is available to talk to you 24/7, so it's ready when you are.